Thank you for joining us today for the first session of day 2 of our conference. It's great to be welcoming you back this morning. While we're waiting for more people to join, I can see the numbers going up. I'll cover some housekeeping points. All of the conference sessions are being recorded, and we'll share any handouts, slides and a link to the video recording after the event. So you'll have that sent to you via email, hopefully at the start of next week. This event is CPD accredited. If you would like a certificate, we need your consent to share your data with the awarding body. So please give us permission in the survey that will pop up as you leave the session. We're really hoping that you'll have lots of questions during the session. Please post them into the Q&A function and we'll endeavour to get to as many as possible. Finally, we'd like to thank the Institute of Engineering and Technology for sponsoring this event. We're delighted to have their support for the 2 days. Numbers are still going up, so I'll just hold for one more minute. Okay, I think we'll make a start. Hello and welcome. My name is Hannah Stilton. I'm the CEO of Governors for Schools. I'm delighted to welcome you to the session today, where I'll be speaking to Dominic McGonigal, who joined the board of a failing school and after 3 years of transformation saw it graded as outstanding by Ofsted. Dominic has been a governor, vice chair and chair at several schools. Outside of the education sector, Dominic is a director, entrepreneur and composer. We're also delighted to have him on our own board of trustees. During this session, we'd really love to receive questions from you, so please do use the Q&A function to post them and we'll get to as many as possible. So to kick us off, welcome Dominic, and to help us understand the context of your story, can you tell us a little bit about your school?
Yes, absolutely. I'm delighted to be here, and it's great to see so many people on the call. And I hope this will be a valuable session for all of us. But here we're talking about an inner London school, and as probably many of you know, inner London schools are sort of characterised by a very sort of broad mix of pupils. It's a primary school. About sort of 60–70% are English as an additional language, and a pretty high percentage of pupil premium. In this case, the school roll had fallen dramatically. It was down from about 350 down to about 170. Which anyone who's a governor will know has implications. And really nobody was choosing the school as a sort of first choice option at reception. And in the year that we took on the school, the SATs results were well, embarrassingly low. It was sort of 18% actually got expected level in reading. So that's that's the school. That's what we took on.
Excellent, thank you. That's a good overview. Can you tell us a bit about your background? So obviously you were thrown into the school. What experience did you bring to the board?
Well, as a governor, fortunately, I had quite a lot of experience. I've been a chair at another school, which was outstanding, for about 5 years. I've been a governor for 3 or 4 years before that, and I was also vice chair at another school locally. Yeah. So I had a fair amount of experience, and I brought obviously a lot of experience from elsewhere. As you mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur, director, and composer, and have many years of experience of all sorts of situations.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine those skills were really useful in the process.
They certainly were.
Yeah. Can you give us an overview then of the journey that from failing to outstanding, the journey that the school took? And
yes. So what happened was it was a local authority school, and it was transferred to United Learning, which is a multi-academy trust. And we had a head, Seamus Gibbons, who was appointed shortly before the transfer, 1 term before the transfer, and then took on the head formally when United Learning took on the school. And I was appointed by the United Learning Trust as the chair of the board, of a non-existent board. So then had to sort of create the board. And our first focus, Seamus and myself, initially, was on teaching and learning. You know, for us, that was the heart of it. That we had to get teaching and learning right up to standard, that was our focus from the beginning. And in terms of the board, we had, in a way, it was a good thing. We had a blank sheet of paper to create a completely new board of governors, we did that actually largely through Governors for Schools. Almost the entire board was recruited through Governors for Schools, and you know, we obviously had a crucial role in setting the direction, and particularly in my case, obviously a sort of mentoring role, working with Seamus, because it's a very difficult position to be in, to be the head of a school that has to go through such a radical transformation.
I can imagine. What sort of skills were you looking for when you were recruiting that new board?
I was looking for two things. I was looking for people who could be good governors, you know, in a non-exec capacity, and that's a very particular role. You know, we don't get involved in the executive side, but we should have that kind of experience, so that we can add something as sort of non-exec governors. And I was also looking for a broad range of specific skills. So we actually created our own skills audit in order to map that, so that we could cover the key areas, you know, like finance, all the various compliance issues, the curriculum, SEND, health and safety, safeguarding, etc. And so we recruited in order to get that broad mix of skills.
Lovely, thank you. Please do, for the audience, please do put any questions in the Q&A, just and we'll come to them as we go through. So Dominic, clearly you had lots of things to sort out when you sort of took on this role. Where on earth did you start?
Really good question, because as you say, you know, you look around and you think, oh gosh, you know, there's so much to do, and it is quite daunting actually, and I think you have to be quite disciplined about where you start, because you can't do everything, our starting point was actually standards, you know, creating an expectation that we should be an outstanding school, you know, creating that as an expectation, not as a sort of rather vague goal, but actually an expectation, and providing sort of direction towards that. And with that expectation came a sort of a vision for the school. And actually, I think one of the really powerful things that often gets overlooked is that we actually created a vision for each pupil. So we set down a very clear commitment to every child in the school, that every child would, for instance, learn a musical instrument and play that instrument in a performance. Every child would represent the school in a sport. Every child would spend one night away from school, because we found we had children who had actually very limited experiences in our locality. That's not uncommon, even in London. You know, we're a mile and a half from 4 of the best museums in the world, and we found that many of them didn't even know they existed, let alone visit them. So one of the commitments was that they would visit a museum. that they would visit a theatre and see a performance. And that was a very broad commitment, which I think spoke volumes for the sort of quality of the education that we were offering, and that created that expectation.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got lots of questions coming in around the board members. You mentioned that you were looking for non-exec candidates. Can you explain in simple terms what you meant by that for your starting board?
Yeah, for me, it's a very subtle role of being a governor. You know, this balance between support and critique, because obviously we hold the head and the staff to account, absolutely, but we also have a supporting role in helping the head and the staff to perform and to deliver. So you know, we had a sort of an informal kind of interview process. It was a sort of chat, but it was a structured chat, where I wanted to understand that anybody joining the board would understand that part of the role, and that's something that we set out very clearly in our terms. We created our own terms of reference, obviously using standard templates, but that comes through very clearly in the terms of reference as to how we carry out our role.
Great. So you said that you used Governors for Schools to help find people. Did you find it easy to find the right people?
I would say broadly, yes. Actually, it was you know, it's a very good service. I basically said, look, I'm looking for, you know, somebody with finance skills, or somebody who knows about SEND or whatever it was. Yeah, we had some very good candidates. I think the other interesting thing is that we ended up with what was probably the youngest governing body in the country. You know, at one point we had 2/3 of the board under 35 years of age.
Wow, that's impressive. Good to hear. Lovely. Right, we've got lots of questions. So we'll just move on from that sort of side of things. Was it a challenge to remain strategic through the process, or was it? I just think when you're going through such a period of change, was there a sort of danger of getting into the operational?
No, absolutely, yeah. Because you look around and kind of everything needs fixing. So you have to, you do. I'd say you do have. I think you have to be very disciplined in keeping your focus on the big prize. So in governing body meetings and in particular some reports from the head, that was really what we were looking at. But absolutely, we had to make sure that nothing fell over during that process. So it was just doing what was necessary to make sure that we didn't have any, you know, safeguarding incidents or anything like that. And with that goes a sort of an acceptance that you know, some things will remain wrong for maybe a year, maybe 2 years. But you have to make sure that it's the things that are not going to completely disrupt the education of the children.
Sure, I can understand that. A couple of questions. Were you working under the pre-2019 or post-29 inspection framework? When was it? Was it a data focus or a curriculum focus in regards to Ofsted?
We were actually right on the cusp. Our Ofsted was actually in 2019, so it was kind of that actually made it a bit of a challenge because we weren't quite sure what the rules were.
What was coming for you? How did the school engage staff in the process of turning the school around, enabling them to feel fully part of the change without them feeling overwhelmed by all the additional pressures that were inevitably going to come with such a stressful journey?
Yeah, that was a really, really good point. And so I attended a couple of staff meetings, you know, not to say very much, but just to sort of be there and support the head. And we did constantly ask about the staff throughout the process, because it's absolutely essential that we kept the staff on board and had their buy-in to the vision, which we got, and then we had to sort of hang on to that through some very difficult times. Yeah.
How did you generate that buy-in for the changes needed? Was it through those meetings, or were there other things that you did?
It was through those meetings, through the staff meetings. Obviously, a huge amount of work that Seamus did as head, directly with the staff, with the staff as a group, with the weekly staff meeting, and with the and on a sort of one-to-one basis. And then we also we put in place a much more rigorous sort of senior leadership team, because in order to get teaching and learning up to an outstanding level, we realized we had to do a lot of sort of peer support with teachers. Because again, it's it's a lonely job for the head. It's quite lonely for a class teacher, who's in the class on their own, so we provided a lot of peer support, which was ongoing. It wasn't a sort of once a term assessment. It was very much ongoing support.
A few questions around engaging with parents coming in, which I think is an interesting one. How did you engage with the parents in establishing your vision for each student, that wonderful vision for everybody to have those experiences, and your expectations that the school was going to move to outstanding?
That's a really big question. I mean, when we took on the school, the engagement with the parents was, you could say, was very, very low, and the expectation of the parents was I'd say shockingly low, actually. The parents really just didn't expect anything from the school, and obviously that was a sort of the word around the street, which is why nobody wanted their child really to go to the school unless it was the last choice. And we did engage with the parents, but that was probably the single hardest thing, because it took the longest to turn around. I mean, it did turn around, and then we gradually got a sort of turnaround where parents were thinking, oh, actually, that school is that would be a good school for my child. There was a sort of turning point after about sort of 18 months, 2 years, and then obviously when we got the outstanding Ofsted, then that was the moment when everybody woke up and said, oh, right, yes, right, this is a school that's going to do well for my child.
Okay, thank you. How did you balance the views across the new board, which John has said would be potentially very difficult, or that the different views would differ about how to take things forward?
Actually, I think we were remarkably sort of aligned on that point, actually, because we stuck to the a very simple vision. Then there were different ways of carrying that out. So it's certainly that the strategy evolved over time, no doubt, and the activities certainly evolved. There was in the early the sort of the early months, we had to go through staff restructuring, etc., and then over time we were focusing on different things, and I think it was probably just a case of having very open discussions. The head was very good at being very honest in his reports to each board, and we had a very open discussion about the issues that we were facing.
So when you recruited the board, did you sort of recruit a full board to straight away, or did you add people as you went through, thinking about the skills that you needed at different points? If you were doing the restructuring at the beginning, I can imagine somebody with HR would be really useful, but maybe further on different skills. Did you go straight to having 12 people around the table, or was it more of a gradual process?
It was a fairly gradual process. So yeah, we recruited, I suppose, 2 or 3 at a time. So it did take a few months to get up to full strength.
Okay. Somebody's asked whether you had to turn any governors away.
Gosh. We didn't turn any away, but yes, during the sort of recruitment process, there were 1 or 2 that where we had the sort of conversation and then didn't take that any further. In a couple of cases, that's because they decided it wasn't for them, and in certainly in at least one case, I was thinking, actually, I'm not sure this person would really add much to the board, and we were obviously looking at sort of multiple candidates anyway, so it was a case of sort of looking through and saying, okay, who would be the best fit and add the most in terms of the sort of skill set.
Did you make them aware of the situation before appointing them? I mean, were they fully aware of the situation of the school before they joined?
Oh, absolutely, yes, because I spoke to them all, had a sort of informal interview, I suppose you could call it. But yes, I was very honest about the situation of the school, and that sort of motivated some people, and others were rather daunted by it, and I think that's all sort of part of the process. And we also made sure that they all visited the school before being appointed, or being putting themselves forward for appointment formally.
Good, that's what we like to hear. What were the crucial success factors in the school improvement journey?
Well, we were obviously looking at all the key metrics, and United Learning were very good at providing the data in sort of increasingly good sort of KPIs. So we were looking at the obviously the SATs results, but more importantly, we were looking at the progress of children on a termly basis. So I mean, Seamus was able to put in a very good sort of kind of light touch progress system, so that actually it was the point where we could look at what was happening in year 2 in the winter term for reading, and Seamus to be able to say, oh yes, well we're a little bit behind on that because of this child or that child or whatever, and so that was us looking really looking in detail at that data, and interrogating it, but then what that meant was that the teachers developed and demonstrated an incredibly good knowledge of the children, which is, I think, particularly crucial, when you're in an SEND situation, that the teacher really understands how that child ticks and how that child learns. Lovely.
What type of support did you get from the Trust? Did they help with best practice or resources? What did they do to support you?
Yeah, the Trust, United Learning was extremely helpful. It was great to have that sort of central office support. I mean, on HR, it's absolutely critical. You have to get that the process is right on HR 100%. And they provided the kind of the nuts and bolts. They provided all the finance data, so that because we had quite we had budgeting issues, obviously, with such a small school role, and yeah, they provided support on the governance side as well.
Excellent. What were some of the toughest decisions that the governing body and head teacher had to make in the journey? Were there any decisions that split the governing board? So you said generally you were in agreement, but what were the toughest decisions that you had to make?
I can't remember any decision that split the board, to be honest. No, I think, because as I say, we did talk it through all the time. So at each meeting, we would go through where we were on teaching and learning, where we were on each of the areas. So we actually set up a portfolio system for the governing board. So rather than committees, we actually have all the key areas allocated to one governor. So we have a finance governor, an SEND governor, early years governor, etc. So they can dig deep and really look at that area. And we were always sort of cross-referencing with that to make sure that we were, keeping all the plates spinning.
So having those link governors was really helpful, I can imagine. Did the board consider mental health and well-being of the staff through the process? I should imagine in a period of a lot of change that was probably on your radar. Did you use any education support helplines or employee assistant programs to help?
No, you're right. That was absolutely on our radar, and that came up as a question from the governors, as far as I remember, to every single meeting. Wow. And there were two things we were looking out for. One was the sort of general morale of the staff. So we were looking at staff surveys. We were asking the head and other team members. So I'm always very keen on getting other staff to attend occasional board meetings to present something on their area. So we were looking at that across the board, but we were also looking particularly at Seamus as the head, because I say it's a very lonely place to be when you're going through that transformation, because in the early stages, the early weeks, there's very often in that situation, I've had this in business as well, there's nobody you can trust. And then gradually you develop that trust within the team. But that at that stage, the only person Seamus could speak to was me. So we were very, very aware of that, and the pressures on him personally in making some very difficult decisions and carrying them out. We were very aware of that, and kept in tune, and made sure that Seamus had the support that he needed, and also had almost a sort of bit of an escape valve that he had one or two other things that when he didn't have to think about the school 24/7.
Excellent. How much intervention and support did you have from the trust, so from United Learning? Was it helpful, or did it confuse things for staff or governors? And how did you manage that relationship between the local governing board and the multi-academy trust board?
We had a huge amount of support, actually. And I suppose that's where the terms of reference came in, because we created our own terms of reference, very much looking at the sort of delegation route, which in a multi-academy trust is fairly complicated, because the LGB is directly responsible to the trust, to the trust as a board, and the head is actually managed by the staff, by in our case a director within the trust. So the management line goes that way, rather than through the chair of governors, which you have in a local authority school. So I suppose we were very clear about the roles and the lines of delegation, and we were not afraid to ask for help from the trust whenever we needed it.
and it sounds like you had a good relationship. So question here, interesting. As a governor, how do you encourage a head teachers to stretch their thinking when they are very happy with a good Ofsted score due to maybe the demographic of the school? How do you get them to aim for that outstanding grade? Whether it's achieved or not, how do you get them to sort of really aspire to get there?
That's a really good question, because
is it something that Seamus came with, or did you?
No, Seamus absolutely came with that. Yeah, but you know, I've seen other situations where you have a head that is, you know, happy with good, and I think you just have to really reinforce that expectation of outstanding is perfectly normal. You know, this is not something exceptional. There's no reason why children shouldn't have an outstanding education. You know, we have generally, you know, good teachers around. You know, I know, you know, in some areas there are recruitment issues, but we found that we could get really good teachers. We did a lot of work with those teachers. So where we were recruiting NQTs, we were part of a teaching alliance, and put a lot of time into getting those teachers up to outstanding as quickly as possible.
So it wasn't just the head teacher, it was making sure that all of the staff were on board, that you were moving in that direction.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. How did you manage the financial demands of the restructure, the senior leadership team restructure, and staff training and extra support that you had to put in? I guess with a nod to the fact that we're worried about finances generally at the moment.
Yeah, that was a real challenge. I mean, we as I say, we had the advantage of being in a multi-academy trust, so we had good financial support, and we also had our own business manager who's superb, and she really managed the budget incredibly well. So we went through a very rigorous budgeting process, and I'm very glad that you know, our first cut of the budget was a positive budget, but we had to take some very tough decisions of what we could do and what we couldn't do. So clearly the class teaching and the TA support, where it was really crucial. So for us, that was obviously TA support for you know, SEND and that kind of thing, and pupil premium, but also making sure we had good TA support in the early years, because you know, from our perspective, if we get really good, particularly speech and language in the early years, that's a great foundation for learning later on in the school. But it meant that we had to say no to a music specialist, no to a sports specialist. You know, we just have to say, look, we simply can't do that. We managed to get a little bit of music coming in on a more sort of ad hoc basis, but you know, for me as a musician, that was a difficult decision.
I can imagine. Yes, yeah. So it took 3 years to move from failing to outstanding. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you get the student number back up to where you wanted it to be at the end of those 3 years? So when it was, yeah.
Well, I'm happy to say that we're now oversubscribed.
Okay, excellent, great situation to be in. Was there any measurement of the progress by the board on any aspects of teaching and learning? So apart from the Ofsted assessment, did you sort of monitor that as you went through?
Absolutely. We were monitoring that on an ongoing basis. As I say, we put in some what I'm proud to say is a very, very good peer support of obviously sort of subject leaders and specialty like that, but also just peer support for quality of teaching, and that was done on a rather informal basis, because you know, we felt, and Seamus in particular felt, that he didn't want you know, senior team leaders sort of going into a classroom in order to inspect You know, they were going into classroom to observe, you know, maybe for 5 minutes, maybe for 30 minutes, and then to you know, have a dialogue with the teacher as a sort of coaching experience, really, in order to help the teacher in you know, self-reflection, self-assessment, and to, you know, improve over time.
Okay, thank you. Got lots of questions about the makeup of the board. Did you have staff governors? Did you have parent governors? Where did you pull people from?
Yeah, good question. Well, we created our own terms of reference, so we kept it fairly open. Actually, we didn't. We had one staff governor, but we didn't actually have a designated parent governor, and we did recruit parent, but it was very hard, because I say the expectation of the parents was so low that you know, they initially they weren't interested. So we did after a few months we managed to recruit a parent as a governor, and we had staff governor, which we rotated on an annual basis, so that we could actually give a number of staff the experience of being on the board.
Okay, given the demographic of the school, that you had a large non-English speaking population, how diverse was your board? What is your board?
Oh, yeah, it is very diverse, yes.
Okay, yeah, so you managed to get that.
Yes, yeah, no, no, that's another thing that's quite pleased about achieving.
So when you first brought, we've got lots of questions about bringing governors on. When you brought them on, did you speak to them about the time commitment that was required, and realistically, what was the time commitment with a requires improvement school? We know that from speaking to governors that we placed, that sometimes that can mean that the time commitment can be greater than in a good or an outstanding school.
Yes, we were very clear about that, and I think we were also, well, I was certainly keen to be disciplined about the time that we gave, because, you know, we're all volunteers, and I was certainly keen on getting people who are, you know, busy and successful in other areas of life, and therefore, you know, won't necessarily have the time. And in the end, what happened was we had a sort of mixture. We had some people who were able to give quite a lot of time and actually, you know, visit the school. One governor was in there, you know, sort of twice a week, just actually for other purposes, but it meant that she was very sort of visible. Whereas others, we would say, you know, one visit per term, and then because we didn't have any committees, we just had the 5 sort of board meetings. We did also have a strategy session with the staff. Actually, I should have mentioned that earlier. That was an important part of getting the staff buy-in into the vision, and that was a sort of late afternoon session lasting for about 4 hours, I think. So yeah, we were honest about the time commitment.
And did you have those longer sessions? Was that on an annual basis? Like, I know we have a lot of governing boards have strategy days, maybe in the beginning of September or at the end of July. Is that the sort of model that you went with?
That's right. Yes. And we also instituted a sort of review system. So each year we have a skills audit. So we go back over, you know, make sure we've got all the skills, and we always come out with a very good broad spread on that. And then we also do a sort of very light touch governance review, which is done on, we use a little sort of survey form where we ask people to sort of reflect on the performance of the governing body, on the chair, and on their own contribution as well. And then we sort of collate that, and then that forms an opportunity for us to review as a board in July each year.
Is it something that you created yourselves, or is it?
It is. We did create it ourselves. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So many questions. How difficult is it to stay at the top of the Premier League? What are your thoughts on sort of succession planning and maintaining that outstanding grading?
Really good question, because you're absolutely right. Outstanding is not a sort of, a singular event. It's an ongoing process. And I did have that situation in a previous school, actually, where I became chair of governors of an outstanding school, and then the challenge was absolutely to remain outstanding. You've got to avoid complacency at that's the biggest danger. So I suppose we sort of just kept challenging, kept not quite raising the bar, but just looking at sort of other areas. Well, okay, great, we're outstanding, but what about the sports provision? And actually, really, shouldn't we be offering three sports to every child rather than just one on a Thursday afternoon? So keeping things moving, that one. And that situation, the head then retired, so we had to appoint a new head, which is always the single biggest, most important thing that any governing body has to do. So we appointed a new head, and of course, inevitably, we then had an inspection. I think it was 6 months after that. And I'm very pleased to say that we came out at, well, an embarrassingly good outstanding at that inspection.
Lovely, good to hear. Okay, sorry, I just had a question. It's all moved now. Was funding a huge hurdle given your low intake? So given that you had such a sort of low pupil number at the beginning, how did you manage that shortfall?
Yeah, finance was an absolute nightmare. We simply had to work out what we could afford, and prioritize, as I say, obviously the class teacher, and really target that TA support where it would make a difference.
Sure. So you mentioned that the governance team of the trust was supportive in your journey. What role did the clerk or governance professional play in the school improvement?
Oh yeah, that was another good one. We were fortunate in having a good clerk through a sort of third party service, actually. Sorry, actually, no, right at the start we didn't have a clerk. So we used actually our business manager was our clerk,
right.
Who is hugely competent, but of course ultimately we didn't want that because of separation of duties, etc. So it was after about probably a year, maybe even 2 years, that we got a sort of third party clerk in. Yeah, I mean. Yes, our business manager as clerk was really well organised and actually sort of kept things on the road for us.
So the school business manager that you had, was that somebody who sat within the actual school, or was that somebody who worked across the trust?
No, she worked part-time just for the school.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Were you so question around wellbeing is again we talked about staff wellbeing. How about governor wellbeing? And this is something that came up in our wellbeing session yesterday. Was there support for you as a chair of governors and for the board around your own wellbeing? I would imagine it's quite a difficult journey to making. You're making challenging decisions. How was it for you?
Yes, and that's a really good question. So I was keen that we had ad hoc conversations outside board meetings between governors, and we also had, occasionally we would go out for a drink after a governing body meeting, which again I think was a sort of good way of us bonding as a group, and feeling that we had the support of each other, and then if anything sort of particularly popped up, and I would have a sort of telephone conversation with the vice chair or whatever. And for me personally, I'm personally very keen on sort of CPD in its broadest sense. So, I always go to the chair forums whenever I can, and attend other events and do sort of refreshers on all sorts of things. And that I think, as you know, I think that was very helpful for me personally.
Okay. When did you know you were on the right track, and how did you know that?
I think it was looking at that class level data,
Right.
that, you know, we saw that quite quickly we were getting some really good progress. You know, I'll give you one instance. We had a young boy who joined us in year 5, beginning of year 5, who had effectively 0 English, and you know, obviously we sort of put him in with others, with various sort of support measures, and by the end of year 6, he did his SATs, and he came out absolutely on expected levels,
Amazing.
and that's because of the, you know, we were looking at the progress, as I say, on a termly basis, that the children were making.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you sorry, I just lost the question again. Did you know before Ofsted came that you were on track for outstanding, or was it a wonderful surprise, or were you
that's a funny one, because
before Ofsted coming, were you feeling confident that you were going to do well?
We were reasonably confident, because we used the CEF to I should have mentioned that, actually. We used the CEP as a sort of measure of how we were doing, you know, using with a RAG system. So we were very self-critical, actually, of each area, and saying, you know, no, that's not good enough. Yes, some of it is, but it's not good enough right across the board. So we were very self-critical in private, through the CEF. But over time, you know, we did see those, you know, all of those measures sort of turning to green one by one. So by the time we got to the Ofsted, we were assessing ourselves as either sort of good with outstanding elements, or outstanding with good elements. But also, and I think that's probably one of the things that came through to the Ofsted inspectors, that you know, we didn't think it was game over. I mean, we were still, you know, constantly trying to improve things.
Excellent. Question, and you mentioned earlier about the school business manager being the clerk. How did you manage possible conflicts of interest?
I suppose it's just me as chair, particularly, just making sure that there aren't any conflicts of interest, because clearly, you know, as business manager, she had a very sort of particular role on the finances and some of the HR as well. So I suppose we just had to make sure that her record of the meetings was entirely accurate, which it was, and that if there were any difficult conversations, either they were managed very carefully in the board, or in some cases it would be just a conversation between myself and the head.
Lovely. You mentioned the non-executive nature of the governor role. Were there any times when you wished you had a more executive role, or was an executive?
No, I didn't want to get stuck into that. I've done that elsewhere.
Okay, fair enough. We are on time. We're running out of time very, very soon. Just one last question then. Are there still gaps in attainment for disadvantaged children, or have you managed to close those gaps?
We're doing pretty well, actually, on those measures, because we're looking at a more sophisticated level about all the the differentiators, but you're never there. You're never there. And I mean, interesting. I mean, funny enough, our gap is the inverse of EAL. Our EAL pupils are outperforming the non-EAL pupils. But I should also mention that we've now taken on another school, so we're halfway through the same journey with another school.
Wow. So you're starting that journey again now.
Yes.
Good way to end up. What is the key takeaway that you're now thinking about when you're going through that journey again?
Okay. Well, I'd say two things. One is absolutely, set the vision, set the standard, set the expectation, and hang on to it. And then in parallel with that, just do it faster.
Do it faster. Okay, thank you ever so much, Dominic. We have still got lots of questions in the chat. We will respond to people. We'll sort of share the answers to those questions generally with everybody afterwards. Sorry we couldn't get some more, but I think really fascinating to hear from you, Dominic, and to hear about your journey. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are now going to hear from Pat Barber. Pat is a member of Independent Governor Support. She's going to share how their service can help you if you're in a similar situation maybe to where Dominic was, and help you with support for your governor role. So we're going to hand over to Pat now.
Hello, good morning everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you. I'm talking about IGovS. IGovS is an independent governor support which actually was born out of the changeover from the National Governors Association taking over the role of the National Leaders of Governance. At that time, the governors that were the founder governors of Independent Governor Support were not necessarily wedded to the mission and vision of National Governors Association of selling services. We were really about, and become national leaders of governance so that we could support people and governing boards who were in difficult situations, but doing it free of charge actually. And we wanted to continue in that vein and not just offer a paid for service, because quite often when schools are in difficulty, there's finance problems, there's all sorts of problems, and to get a huge budget bill from us for supporting you just didn't seem within the spirit of what we wanted to offer. So IGovS was actually born, and I was one of the founder people in the group, and we are growing rapidly. On my next screen, if somebody could move on the screen please, thank you, you'll see that we started in July 21. We had 32 members. In fact, I know another 2 members have joined just this week, so we're up to 34 now. And it's people similar to ourselves who've all been long-serving governors, have a good track record of school improvement in all phases of education, and are across the country. And that's been one of the benefits of COVID actually, that we can do this remote engagement now, which is really great. But we as we say, we're across the country, but people are willing to travel if it really is required. But what we're really about is offering a friend actually. We want to be a friend, we want to be able to help you. We have a vast amount of knowledge amongst all of our members, and if you select a member, you can go online and register an interest. If you need some support, it could be that you want an independent person to sit on a complaint panel. It could be you've had a really bad meeting, you don't know the answer, you don't want to talk to anyone in the school, then you phone an IGovS and we will find somebody to mentor you along that journey and be there to support you. I connected with some people right at the very beginning in 21. I don't hear from them for 6 months, and then I might get a call. That's what we're about. That's what we're here for. You've got a problem. This problem is shared. It's no longer a problem. And if I don't have the answer, or one of my colleagues doesn't have the answer, we put it out and we'll find the answer for you. So we're here really to support you right through the journey. I know what it's like. I have walked that journey that Dominic has been on. I'm still a chair of governors in 4 schools. So and they're all mixed schools, academies and maintained schools, from requires improvements, IEB boards, etc. So all of our members have that same wide range of experiences. So somewhere along the line we have probably heard it, seen it, or done it. So we just want to offer this service to you and let you know that we are here, and how to get in contact with us. As I say, it is free, there's no charge, but if you do decide that you want to take your the support a little bit further, you may say, actually we could do with a training session for our board. Are you willing to do that? Then that is something you would negotiate with the individual colleague that you're connected to. So then, and then if you really want to have a face-to-face meeting, then that's fine, we will offer it, but there may be a charge for travel expenses. But apart from that, there's no actual charge for connecting with us, to being in touch with us, and for our initial support to you. So these are the type of support that we've been offering. As I say, chair support and advice, how to find a new chair. Well, you've got Governor's Support for Schools to help you with that, but to give you some hints and tips at how we've all been there. We've all had this trouble. Even in my own school now, I've got trouble recruiting governors because I'm actually working as a foundation governor under the Catholic diocese, and therefore we have to have so many Catholic governors on our boards. It's not possible, and it's very difficult to create them. You know, to find them anywhere. So we are having problems, but we're working through it. I've only got 5 minutes, so I can't tell you everything we do. It is here. All I can say, don't feel you're alone in this. We are here to support you. Please call if you need any help. Or on the opposite side, if you feel you have that experience and you would also like to be one of the team and would like to offer that support to another board, somewhere up country, down country, depending on where you're situated, we'd love to hear from you too. All the information is on the website. So the next slide will show you, and I believe these slides have been sent to you. The blue spots tell you where we are situated, but we are willing to travel reasonable distances or remotely connect with you. So I hope you find some opportunity to connect with us, and hopefully I'll speak to some of you soon. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pat. Could you just, so we just got a question in the chat, the ever present problem of acronyms in education, NLGs and ERGs. Can you just explain those two?
NLGs is a National Leader of Governance, and when I became a national leader, I had to go through a process of attending actually the Institute of Education. I had to travel up to Nottingham for a 2-day course, and then you had to go through an interview process, etc., and you had to do a case study about how you had improved education through governance. So that was oh gosh, that was some years ago I'd done that. But and the other one was
ERGs.
External reviews of governance. That's if you have an Ofsted that actually puts you into requires improvements, one of the things they will say is you have to have an external review of governance carried out. Now, the National Governors Association will do that at a cost, but there are other options out there for you. So don't feel that you're just tied to that one place, because there are other options. And then from that, it will review your governing board, your way you work, your committee structures, and give hints and tips about how you can improve what you are doing to further the improvement of education in your schools.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Pat. Thank you both for joining us today. It has been a really fascinating session, and I hope that everyone attending has enjoyed it. We do look forward to welcoming people back to further sessions for the day. We have another 5 or 6 sessions coming over the course of today. Thank you to all those who've joined us, and we look forward to seeing you back soon.